Welcome to Anita Talks History and Genealogy. Thank you, everyone, for joining me as I continue on this journey to tell my truths, to share my story and my journey in the hopes that it will help others who are on the same path, who maybe are not as far along as I am on my journey. And that is why I continue to come on and just, you know, uh, speak to everyone about what it takes to, get that family history together. And the reason that it's such a passion with me is because they tell us we have no history. And I want my people to know we indeed have a history. And they tried to strip us of that, but in spite of that, we have continued on, and many of us have put together our history. And guess what? The history I put together connects with other people um, who who share not only my DNA, who share the same city, county, state, um, or country. It really is a small world when you think about it. And so it's so important, you know, to have that and to have these people get out of our face about saying you have no history. We want I want you to all to know everybody has a history. Some of us have more history than those who are in our face telling us we don't have a history. And they don't even know their history. So how can they tell us what our history is? Okay? So um, before I begin, please hit that like, share, and subscribe button. I have now been elevated to having subscriptions, paid subscriptions. If you want to be a part of the perks that come with, you know, being a paid subscriber, um, please do join me. Um, I'm having a different, I'm offering um, perks for those who are paid subscribers. And also, I'm going to be doing, doing some of these videos, and that those videos will be only for the, paid subscribers, and they will be more detailed than just the, general uh, videos that I'm doing now. But everything that I do is going to have information, you know, that you all can use. You're always free to you're always free to email me or leave a message with with your questions. So and the subscriptions will help me. The paid subscriptions will help me to continue to do what I'm doing and to remain here on this channel. It takes a lot of time and effort. Um, I, you know, it took me over 30 years to put together something that is what I would say concrete. You know, on all of my lines, I have at least some information. Some of my lines, I have, you know, more information than on other lines. Okay, and everything that I'm sharing with you all is my opinion. A disclaimer that this is from the information that I have been able to gather, and I'm telling my story and my journey, and it's not I'm not speaking for anyone else. I can't speak for you all that are out there because it's all your journey is probably different from my journey, unless we're related. And even if you're related, there will still be lines that are not connected to my lines. You know, so that's the way it works. It's like a puzzle. Um, and the genealogy. This is what I've learned, and correct me if I'm wrong. But it started here. They said that I'm being told that the Mormons started the genealogy because they wanted to make sure that no melanated person um, uh, held a priesthood or any kind of position in their church, and so they were the ones that began this genealogy thing where they were tracing um, people's lines back to Europe. They weren't looking at Africa, and they weren't necessarily looking at the natives or the indigenous people to the Americas. They were looking at who came from Europe. And I'm going to tell you something. I'll share a secret. Y'all can tell it, try to keep a secret. But anybody that is in and around the South, from where I come from, Virginia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, if you were a white person and they talking about they've been there 6, 7, 8 generations, you're probably my cousin. Because many of the lines that I was tracing, come to find out, especially on my mother's side, that there was a lot of white passing people. Those are, the people that I was looking for, were disappearing. And I'm like, where did they go? Where did they go? Well, come to find out, that my mother said that a lot of the relatives who would be in a census, I would see them in a census. And then the next census, they disappeared. And I was like, oh, did they die or did they pass on? Mom said, no, they're right up there in another county, and they're listed as white. And when I went to that county and I saw the surnames, and yes, it was the same names, and that was in Pennsylvania, same thing in Virginia, and I don't know that, like North Carolina was a little bit harder, but there's a lot of people calling themselves Melungeons who have some dark native blood. So they may be native, they may be, African, but, part African or African and white, but they were Melungeons, and they thought they were native and white, and come to find out that a lot of them are more, from the DNA test, more African. But again, here in the United States, just because you were dark-skinned or brown-skinned does not mean you are not native. Again, and I said the United States, but I want to say in the Americas, there were dark-skinned dark-skinned indigenous people. My paternal grandfather, Charles Wesley Baxter, his people are indigenous to Colombia, South America. And he was a dark-skinned person. I don't know what they looked like then. I know they portray them, but I know that the features, even though the color is, maybe dark, but the features are definitely indigenous. But they lighten them up just like they lighten the and everybody up when they want to tell the story that Africans never left the continent or tell that lie. Then they lighten people up. But those people became light only after Columbus and Americus Vespucci came and began, um, you know, began making babies with the women from the tribes that were here, from the indigenous people that were here, then they became lighter. And the reason that you that I can say that is that if you look at the humid, these are jungles. They're humid. The Europeans come from mountainous, cold places. They don't come from the jungles like the Africans and the Aborigines and the people of South America. I mean, maybe the people further up around Alaska are lighter, but just when you think about the climate and who's around the climate and who's around the equator, and you can just about tell that these people are brown-skinned people, and and even the European scientists say that Africans populated the entire world, and that they are the modern humans. The Africans came out of Africa and became the modern humans. They adapted to the climate they were in, and that the only not modern humans were the Neanderthals, and, and many Europeans have the Neanderthal gene in them, and the Neanderthals were not considered human, are not considered human. Um, Again, this is can be proven. Do a Google search. Ask AI. I didn't make this up. So back to who was what. So the Melungeons are, they were saying they took a DNA test of them and said it traced back to Africa. But I'm kind of going to side with the Melungeons because some of them are my cousins, and say that how do they know? Why would they say that? Because they were saying, that my native ancestors were Negroes, call them mulattoes, and then they call them colored, Negro, and black. So I'm not going to say that whoever did the DNA tests were right. And at the time when these DNA tests were starting, most Africans were not taking DNA tests. They didn't need to. The ones that were still on the continent, Anyway, but this was the genealogy started with the Mormons here in the United States, trying to make sure that no persons of color came into their church and climbed or ascended to the priesthood. You know, so when I started, documenting and looking through the documents that they had, what I found, it was I was one of the few persons that looked like me there. Most of them were white people, and they were, in the archives. I spent a lot of times in Oakland, California. They have the Mormon Temple, and they have a library there. I don't know if it's still there, but I used to go in there, and at the time they had what they call fiche. It was like a film thing that you did on a reel, and so I would go sit and look at the city and the counties. Uh, um, what they were was the census records to see the surnames. So I was looking for surnames in certain cities and counties in Pennsylvania, and seeing, if I could find, the surnames of my ancestors. And I did start finding them. So once you found them, you could have them printed out. They would print them out for you. And then I used that to, ask questions, of the older people who were still alive at the time, like my mother and some of my cousins, the older cousins who were my mother's, came from my mother's generation, and they were very, they were helpful once I started, you know, doing the research and just asking them questions. And I would go to family reunions and ask questions and get some helpful hints. Um, so a lot of it, what I started was writing letters to the historical societies, to the, getting books from the libraries, genealogical books, um, because the Mormons actually did a good job of putting together um, the information from the cities and counties throughout the United States. So most of what I was doing at the time uh, centered around um, Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Delaware. You know, um, so I was able to piece together who these people were through the research that I um, did using those records, the genealogical records that had been collected by the Mormon Church. And people now take trips and go to Salt Lake City, genealogical trips. You can go there, stay in a hotel, and utilize the resources, or you could. I believe you probably still can, and make a vacation out of it. And um, the NGS, which is the National Genealogical Society, they have, they're a good way, good resource for those who are looking. Um, and also online, the African American Historical and I think it's a historical society, not African American Historical Society, and other, the states have genealogical societies, and some counties have them. There's all kinds of books now. You have the computer, which I didn't have when I started. There's so much that you can find um, online, you know. Um, yeah, I joined Ancestry. I'm a part of Ancestry online because that's the one place I go where I'm meeting people who share my DNA, cousins, and and so that's a good resource. And I know people say, well, I don't want to give out I don't want them people, testing my DNA. Guess what? Them people test your DNA when you're born. They test your DNA because sooner or later you're gonna go to a doctor. They're gonna take your DNA. So they already got it. And the other thing is, like Family Tree DNA, they did, they are uh, the first, that was the first one I went to because they went back. So my mother, her lines were 2T4, that's my maternal line through my mother, and it goes back to, it leaves East Africa like 30 or 40,000 years ago, and they travel up through Morocco into over the Iberian Peninsula into Europe, and they're the first settlers of Europe. They're the people that went into Europe and became the modern human. Though that far back, there were no folks, no people in Europe. They were the first settlers of Europe. Let that sink in. Europeans are only like 6,000 years old. So these modern humans left Africa 30,000 or 35,000 years ago. traversed the Iberian Peninsula and went into what is now Spain. They occupied Spain and Portugal. And that's my mother's line, my maternal line. Okay? And they traversed Europe. They're all throughout Europe, and they wound up in England or Britain, and they were the first settlers of Britain. They were the Welsh people, and I connected to them, you know, through through not just my DNA, but through tracing that, where did these people show up? How did they get to the United States? Well, they were the first settlers of Wales, and they were not a light-skinned people. The first settlers of Wales. They have their own distinct language. They have their own distinct customs, even to this day. But they were colonized by the Anglos and the Normans. And the first thing they did was start lightening them up. Went into the royal families of Wales, the Llewellyns, who were, traced through the male line. So they were traced through the male line, the Llewellyns. But the Normans and Anglos were kidnapping the women from the royal family and killing off they killed off, I think, the last of the royal family from Wales, who was a Llewellyn. And they took the women, and they were forced to marry and have children with these invaders. So when they show you Queen Charlotte, and she is a brown-skinned woman, the Welsh people were brown-skinned people. Just like Cheddar Man, like they say Cheddar Man. Oh, and he was in Britain. Well, that was Wales. Those are the Welsh people. They were the first settlers of Britain. So I found that little tidbit out. So, they don't really want us talking about that history. If you're talking, it's interesting that the way that the white supremacy is, they see someone who is talking about, telling the truth, more of a threat than someone who is walking around with a gun. Think about that. Think about them killing people who are trying to tell the truth, who are fixing to tell the truth, like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. Someone who is talking about what's real and what's true is more of a threat to them than someone who is walking around with a gun or automatic weapon. And that's, you can't make this stuff up. It is crazy. Because if somebody's lying, why don't you debate them and bring your truth? Instead, when you go online, what they do is, what is your source? Instead of, if you don't have to ask me what the source is. If I hear you say something, and I want to know what the source is, I'm going to go look for it. Don't ask what the source is. If I don't give you a source, go look for it. You can Google it. You can AI it. Oh, that's right. They don't like AI. AI is too brutally honest for these poor people. Anyway, so but this is what the process that you go through when you're beginning to research and I'm trying to tell you what you can do to make it, you know, to make it a bit easier. Utilize the information that's already out there, um, and if there is a genealogy club or something like that, you can join that. Um, Also, uh, I have I'm the author of 7 books, and my first 2 books, which is Notes and Documents of Free Persons of Color, the original version, and a revised version. The revised version, I write about DNA and genealogy in the revised version. And the reason that I did the revised version was because the first version, they, when the libraries accepted the first version, it was more, they used it as a reference book. So it's in the reference section. And I wanted to have a book that is more, something that you can pick up and look through and get information, and it's not a reference book, because reference books are kind of boring to sit down and read. So I wrote the Notes and Documents of Free Persons of Color, and that's when I, first started. And then I had to, um, rewrite rewrite the Notes and Documents of Free Persons of Color, and then I wrote Pieces of the Quilt, the Mosaic of an African American Family, and then I wrote The Black Mink with the Life and Times of Henry Green. And the other book that I wrote it's called A Nation of Flaws, Just Us in the Homeland. And it's different, but only because it's about the history of policing in the United States, and how it began with them going after the native people, the indigenous people, my own ancestors, who were hunted down, who were forced, starved, who were infected. I'm from Amherst. My people, the Monica Indian Nation, Amherst County, Virginia, is where they were given blankets with smallpox by General Amherst. They were given infected blankets with smallpox to kill them off. Okay? That's Amherst County, Virginia. That's where Raleigh Penn, my ancestor who was in the Revolutionary War, and James Penn, and great-great-grandfather Robert Penn, all of them came from that area. And we seldom talk about it. I don't know why we don't talk about it. We didn't do it. It was done to our ancestors. So they would, you're looking at a census, and then the people are disappearing. They were dying, being killed off. So this is all a part of the genealogy. Well, people do genealogy, and they'll do the names and where they lived, and all the boring stuff. But me, I was looking not just for the names, I was looking for the history, and I found it. And I'm so grateful and thankful that I can share this with you. I'll be back, and I'll be sharing more. And please don't forget to subscribe. If you can do a paid subscription, do it. They're not that expensive. And also, if you can help me by, you can send a donation to Cash App. It's $ Anita Wills 920. That's my Cash App. And you can also do the Venmo, and that's Anita-Wills-4. That's my Venmo. But regardless, please continue to tune in, continue to share, to like, to subscribe, and I will check with you again shortly. And please ask, if you ask questions, then I can come back. The next time I come back, I'll answer, your questions. Thank you, guys.